It's wonderful to be back, and I'm trying to figure out where everything is in the sacristy since I've been away for a week. And I only had literally 1 hour of sleep last night, so I apologize if I go off track. Literally 1 hour. But I had a beautiful time in Montana. So in the beginning, the readings from the first reading from Genesis we've been having all week, we have seen the creation of all things. And today, we see the falling away of humanity from God. We have that first and original sin and the consequences that follow from that original sin. Our parents were made on the sixth day of the week. The sixth day of the week, which is interesting to note because the sixth day of the week on a Jewish calendar is a Friday. God creates us on a Friday. We fall on a Friday, and we are redeemed on a Friday. Our first parents were in that garden. They were naked until they sinned, and then they covered themselves over because they were ashamed, and then they were hiding from God. Sin always separates. Sin separates husband from wife in this first instance, and separates humanity from God. Love, the goal of love is unity. The goal of sin is disunity and destruction. And we see how sin divided husband from wife, man from God, and soon will divide brother from brother as their children, Cain, will go on to kill his brother Abel. It's interesting to note, too, that they were naked and afraid and they hid from God. And if we go forward in time to the moment of our Lord's crucifixion, when he came to destroy sin and death, what do they do to God? They take Jesus and they strip him naked. Our first parents had to leave the garden so they would not eat of the tree of life. Our Lord Jesus Christ, after he's taken and stripped, they take a whip and they whip his back. We could say that they tilled his back, much as Adam had to till the soil to get his food. The back of Jesus was tilled with the whip. It says here that thorns and thistles grew in the ground so that Adam would have to get his food by the sweat of his brow. And man will take thorns and weave them into a crown and place them on the brow of God. They will take wood, put it on the scourged back of Jesus, leaning against the thorns that piercing his brow, and lead him out of the city of Jerusalem to the hill of Calvary. Now, it's fascinating in John's gospel. John describes Calvary as a garden. John says in the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. So John describes Calvary as a garden. And here, man, taking God, Jesus, making him into his fallen image and likeness by stripping him, tilling his back, putting a crown of thorns on his brow, putting wood on his back, driving him out of the city into the garden, and there plants the tree of life. Is not Jesus Christ the tree of life? In the great order of redemption, we are welcomed back to the tree of life, our Lord Jesus Christ, who proclaimed, "My flesh is true food, my blood is true drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood will live forever." My flesh is true food, my blood is true drink. He is the tree of life. When Our Lady conceived our Lord and gave him birth in Bethlehem, a name which means house of bread, she placed him in a feed box. And our Lord will later proclaim, "I am the bread of life. Who eats my flesh and drinks my blood will live forever." So beautifully, there are so many various imageries here or prefigurements of not only the fall, but of our redemption, of how our Lord undoes everything that sin did to us in our redemption. One little last note here is this Adam and Eve being banned from the garden, and there's two angels with swords that don't allow them to return to the garden. What's interesting is when our Lord rises from the dead and Mary Magdalene comes to the garden looking for him, what does she encounter? Two angels in the garden who have no fiery swords. Now that the redemption has happened, their swords are sheathed, they're sitting down and ask the question, why do you seek the living among the dead? And Jesus is walking in the garden. We could say that God, in Adam, man, Jesus, is walking again in the garden. So beautiful. There's so much here, and I'm not doing it justice with 1 hour of sleep after a long trip back from Montana. However, I invite you to take this first reading today from Genesis and to read it in light of the resurrection, or the passion and resurrection of our Lord. And pay attention to some of the smallest details. And you'll see how our Lord does everything to undo everything we did to restore us to the fullness of life. One final note, if I haven't said that already, final note here, is we find in this moment of the fall of our first parents, the proto-evangelium, the first gospel, the first good news. As soon as they fall, our Lord condemns Satan, and then while he's condemning Satan, he proclaims our redemption when he says to Satan, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will strike at your heel while you strike at his heel, at your head while you strike at his heel. There is this prophesying of the coming of the Messiah, who will put an end to Satan and his rule over humanity. As soon as we fall, God promises our redemption. So anyway, I hope that made sense this morning, because I'm really tired. That was a long journey back. May God bless you and Merry Christmas.